Of course.
I'm grateful to my right honourable friend giving way, and she's explaining what the practical and legal obstacles to this amendment might be, including the operation of the Convention. But if the government concedes there is no moral equivalence between the actions of terrorists and the actions of the military, should not the application of the law recognise that too, in some way? And so if this amendment is not possible, what other means might be possible to ensure that brave members of the armed forces are not unnecessarily and wrongly pursued nearly half a century later?
Secretary of State.
Madam Chair, I fear I do not want to detain the committee for a significantly longer period of time than I already have. I would suggest that perhaps I spend some time with my right honourable friend explaining the thinking behind the Stormont House institutions. And the thinking behind how we would get to a situation where there was not this disproportionate focus on the armed forces and law enforcement. At the moment, we have coronial inquests, where all but one of the coronial inquests that are currently being looked at by the Lord Chief Justice are for former military and law enforcement. We have a police ombudsman that looks at wrongdoings of police officers, and we have a PSNI legacy investigations unit where 30% of that caseload is dealing with killings by the military and law enforcement. That simply cannot, that cannot be considered to be proportionate when only 10% of the killings during the Troubles were by members of the military or law enforcement. It cannot be the case that only 70% of the investigations by the PSNI Legacy Investigations Unit are looking at terrorist killings, all of which were crimes, and we need to get that balance right. And my honourable friend sitting behind my right honourable friend, who the chair of the Select Committee but was also Minister in the Northern Ireland office at the time of the Stormont House talks, has often spoken to me with great passion about how important it is that we do redress this. The current situation, the status quo, is simply not acceptable. We are consulting on how the Stormont House institutions would make that better, but I would welcome representations from all honourable and right honourable members in this chamber to that consultation so we can make sure we do get this right. So, as a Conservative who believes fundamentally in the rule of law, and central to that is the independence of our prosecuting authorities, I believe that however well-intentioned my right honourable friend's amendment is, it does lead us into some very dangerous territory. It would undermine and erode hard-won support for the criminal justice system within Northern Ireland. It would be used by those who wish to rewrite the history of the Troubles to reinforce their claims that the UK government has something to hide and is primarily concerned with covering up the actions of our armed forces. It will be seized upon by those who wish to portray the British state as the oppressor and the armed forces as human rights abusers, still language used by dissident Republicans to boost recruitment today and who continue to pose a severe threat. It will create further uncertainty for those whose cases are currently before the courts, and it is not clear whether their cases would have to be adjourned to the end of the financial year. And I regret to say it will simply play into the hands of those who wish to establish some moral equivalence between those who attacked the rule of law and those whose job it was to defend it. And so I sympathise immensely with my right honourable friend's intentions. I too want to work with him to achieve the aims that he has set out so eloquently. But for the reasons I've stated, Madam Chair, I simply cannot support the amendment in the name of my right honourable friend, and I would urge him to withdraw it.